Hi, Katie.
Hi.
Hi. Oh my God, it's nice to meet you.
Yeah.
This feels weird. I gotta tell you that. This feels weird because I'm literally saying it's nice to meet you online, right?
Uh-huh.
And it's true. I'm meeting you for the first time, but I'm so honored that I have the chance to chat with you today.
Yeah. I'm happy to be here. Happy to meet you as well, and excited for this conversation.
Yes. So do you know anything about me? Do you know anything about Proven Not Perfect? Anything?
I really don't.
Okay. That's awesome. I love that. It's like a first date that we're having in front of everyone.
It is. I'll take that.
We're
Yeah.
having a first date.
Yep.
So here we go. Here we go with the first date. So now where do you start with a first date? Of course, with any first date, right? And here I'm talking to the person that knows mental psychiatry and all the stuff, right? All the brain stuff, right? But you start with that sort of awkward dance, right? Like what foot am I going to go on first? So I'll tell you this. Proven Not Perfect is so raw and so real, almost down to the depths of my soul. In 2014, 15, thereabout, sometime, I was in the middle of the rat race that, quite frankly, I've sought, right? Because if you would have saw Shontra at, 21, leaving college with a finance degree and said, what are you going to be? And I'm going to say, I'm going to be a CEO and I'm going to run the world and all the things, right? And so on that pursuit and on that journey in 2015, I found myself at a place where the resume was rocking and everything was looking great. But behind the scenes, I didn't always feel great, right? Behind the scenes, sometimes I felt like I was knitting stuff together, right? And what really was kind of the coup of the whole thing was one day I was talking with one of my girlfriends from Louisiana. We're catching up, quick catch up. And she shares with me one of our sorority sisters, I thought, relatively young woman, had passed away. She had a heart attack, like sitting in her favorite chair in her house, mom of boys, husband, all the things. She was a strong community worker and a great leader, great person. She passed away. And I can remember at that very moment being motivated to start a diary for 30 days. And for those 30 days, I wanted to chronicle my life, and I wanted to start to bring forward nuggets of things that we could do to live smarter, live better, and be well, right? The internal good, right? And so I started journaling, and I can remember it was the early days of our iPhone and having apps, and there was this nice little journal app that I downloaded, and most of my early writings were in this little journal app. And that happened until about 2017, when I got to one of those pivotal places in my career. I was C-suite level at a global nonprofit and rocking it out. And then, as happens with many women in the C-suite, many women along the journey of the C-suite, something happens where it just doesn't quite work out, right? So didn't just quite work out, not that one. Ended up leaving that role, but it gave me some space to be very thoughtful and intentional. I was asked by Booth University, a wonderful guy by the name of Moy Mendez, who leads their Christian leadership organization, to come in and speak to a room of people. Students that were pursuing their executive MBA, their MBA, all over the world, coming from all over the world, very diverse group. And I shared my story. And after, this woman comes up to me with tears in her eyes and says, you need to write a book. And I was like, thank you so much. I've heard that before. I'm not so sure, really what to do with that. Fast forward, the gentleman Moy who had invited me comes over after and says, I heard her talk to you about a book. I know someone that I'd love to connect you with who you could talk to, might be interested in, you guys doing something together. So I called this person up. We talked, and she says, I hear you're thinking about writing a book. And I was like, well, it's come up a couple times. And she says, tell me your story. I shared my story, and she said, here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I bet you from all the speaking engagements that you've done and all of the journaling that you've told me you've done, you have a book. So spend an afternoon and just pull out all that stuff and lay it down. And literally, over a weekend, piling up things around themes and topics that meant something to me, the book wrote me. And that was the book, Proven Not Perfect. So fast forward, in 2020, that book launched into a podcast. And now that book is taken on a life of its own, and the podcast as well. And I'm all about building a platform that brings together women. Women voices are honored here. Women voices are shared here. Stories are told here. And so that's who I am. I'm mom, I'm wife, I'm all the things, and just Shontra at the same time.
I love it.
Yeah. So Kate, who are you?
I'm still learning.
I love that answer.
Thank you.
I love that answer.
So I'm a mom of one.
Yeah.
14-year-old. I grew up, I wanted to be a neurosurgeon actually when I was younger.
Wow.
And then
What made you, why neurosurgery?
I actually lost my brother. My brother died in a motocross accident when I was 14. He was 17. And I think a big piece with that was, and the
Your
neurosurgeon.
baby's age.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, my daughter doesn't understand, when I
So
was
you can tap into
14.
maybe even where, Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Deep. Okay.
Yeah. But it was more so that the neurosurgeon, and I'm friends with the guys today, actually, who operate on my brother, but they were so awkward, right, about talking to or dealing with adolescents. Like, they didn't want to talk to my parents. No one knew how to handle me, and it was really, really interesting to see that. So I think seeing that, feeling that probably led me, honestly, to medicine.
Yeah.
So I was wanting to be a neurosurgeon, and then all the physicians, when I worked at the hospital as a nursing student, they were like, yeah, no, you've got too much of a personality. They're like, do you want to have kids? Do you want to they're like, if you want any of that, don't be a neurosurgeon. They're like, figure out something else. So,
Yes.
so that's when I became a nurse instead. I did pre-med and a nurse and became a nurse, traveled nursing for a while, enjoyed it. And then I had somebody say, you should go back to anesthesia school. And I was like, I have no idea what that means.
Yeah.
And but then I saw how much anesthesia professionals made.
Yes.
It's like, okay, I'll go.
That's real.
So I actually started doing anesthesia, and I really loved it. Like, it's an art, anesthesia was. And but it was interesting, kind of when you're saying with the C-suites, with your pivotal moment. I was sitting in a big case, neurosurgery case, and to meet our goal, like, basically you would do the surgery, they would wake up within 20 minutes and they would move all their extremities. That's how we knew that the surgery was successful. And I was sitting there with this guy, and he had something called a glioma, and he had about 6 weeks to live. And I was sitting there, and I had just started reading about ketamine, which is kind of the space that I'm in, the psychedelic ketamine space. And I was seeing the.
And you're gonna have to tell me all of that because I have no real idea.
I'll get you there. Don't worry, I'll love it.
Yes.
But sitting there with this guy, with all the skill sets that I had, seeing if he could move, and he had 6 weeks to live, and then seeing the data with ketamine. So basically, one of the studies that I read was one infusion that for 40 minutes was actually taking away suicidality 98% of the time. Right. So I'm sitting there saying, okay, nobody even knows how to access me or my peers in the hospital unless you're right before death.
Wow.
Versus if you can put me up here at the front for these suicidal people that are completely healthy, except for this one negative thought of they want to end their life. And if we can flip that narrative, then how can we create change? Wow. So I started the work-life balance of, you know what, I want to start a clinic, and I'll have a better work-life balance because my daughter wanted me to take her to school and pick her up. And as an anesthesia professional, you can't do that. You're in the hospital at 6:30, you get out at 4. So, you're always finding somebody to take your kid to and from school. So
That's real.
Oh, it's huge.
Yeah.
And my parents never took me to school. Ever.
Yeah.
My whole life.
It's a generational thing.
Yeah. And this was like,
I was a latchkey kid. No,
yeah,
there was no taking me to school unless it was a big event. Yeah.
Right. I was completely that way. But this one, my daughter was like, I don't think you love me because you're not taking me to school. And I was just like, it was like such significant mom guilt, So I was like, all right, I will start the clinic, work at the hospital part-time. That way I can at least be more involved, And it was interesting because at the time, the lead anesthesiologist found out I was opening a clinic. Oh, wow. And we had a conversation, and he said, I need to know, do you want to do voodoo medicine or do you want to do real medicine? Wow. Because you can't do both. I was like, well, I guess I'm going to do voodoo. So I lost my job, from opening the clinic, and it put kind of a fire under me, but it still allowed me to.
So why did it have to be so black and white? Why did it have to?
That's medicine to a point. Medicine's very egocentric, very much so. So if you, in the hospital, we have a beautiful system. If somebody comes in and, there's a lot of data outside that may say that the hospitals aren't beautiful. But from a provider perspective, if you come in and you're a trauma, we're going to call everybody to come in, right? We're going to call all 10 specialists. We don't care if you have insurance. We don't care. We don't deal with the payments. We don't care. We're just here to save your life, period, in a discussion. And that's what happens in the hospital. But when you get outside of the hospital system, it's very territorial. It very much so becomes a business, because it is a business, right?
Yes.
So you see these people in the outpatient sector that they try to build their patient lists. They want consistency of patients coming back. And then that way they have revenue stabilization. And, if you're looking at it from a business, you're right. You're looking at it from a business perspective, they can pay their staff, they can do all these different things. But then if you go back and you start looking at these medications, antidepressants aren't supposed to be taken for greater than 90 days, right? And you've got people on them for 34 years.
Yes.
So the data doesn't support what we're doing. So there's it's nasty, right? And so from a medical perspective, there's such big egos. And it's different. Medical egos are different than business egos.
Yes.
They're both in their each respected worlds that I'm learning.
Yes.
But yeah, if there's something that they disagree with, they will give you an ultimatum as to, what they want you to do versus what they don't want you to do. And
do you think that your voice as a woman plays in this at all, or is this just across the board? Or is there, or does it make that much harder?
It does. I think two things makes it harder. One, I'm female, and then two, I'm a nurse.
Huh.
So
on the pecking order.
Yep. I will never be at the top.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's something that I've accepted.
Yeah.
But it's something too that, I know people who know me in the space.
Yeah.
They know that oh yeah, she's good. She's got it, kind of thing. But I also look at society. So with my company specifically, I have all the specialists aligned with my company because I know I can't protect my company unilaterally. But I do know the top 3 prestigious physicians in the world are heart surgeon, neurosurgeon, trauma surgeon.
Yes.
I have all 3 of those guys with this company. Wow. And they said, why do you want us with your company? And they were like, we don't know anything about ketamine. And I said, it's because of your background. I just want you to show up with me. Just say, she knows what she's talking about.
Okay.
So it's me constantly looking for validation.
Yes.
That society, if they see me walk in with these 3 men.
Yes.
That are these 3 specific surgeons, and they say, she knows what she's talking about. They're like, well, credibility. Yes, she knows what she's talking about.
All right. So we have to do the bridge between making the decision for voodoo medicine, right, as you called it, and taking that leap. What did that look like? Was it just overnight? Was there a bit of a journey?
Oh, there's still a journey.
Conversations you had to have? What did that look like? Because someone, right, is listening and they're in that spot of pivot, and maybe they're even in the same field, and they're saying, okay, how do you deal with the confrontational moment, right, that we all have, where you make a decision and then you pivot? What's that journey look like?
I didn't trust myself enough to do it on my own.
Okay.
My husband at the time, he's a chief medical officer over my company. He's a heart surgeon. Amazing person, right? But it came down to either you choose the company or you choose to have a marriage, because I can't do both. And fortunately, I chose the company because this is I feel like it's my true mission, right? But now he's a bigger cheerleader now that we're divorced than when we were married. Wow. And he's admitted he likes me better now. So he's a great friend. But I went to him and I told him what I wanted to do. And he told me, he said, you might lose your job over this. So you just need to be prepared for that, because they don't like change like this. So I was prepared for that. But what he did is, because he had his own practice at one time, he called somebody who helped him to set up his own practice.
Okay.
And I went and met with this guy, and they told me, they said, this is a commitment. And I think at the time my husband didn't know I would actually divorce him over this commitment.
Well, and now he
told me to be committed, right?
He told you to
I am. But yeah, so we sat down, and literally it was sitting with two men who had, they looked at me like they thought, they were like, this was a hobby. They thought this was a hobby, which was interesting because I think that's a lot of, if a man did it, it'd be like,
hobby.
Yeah, absolutely it is.
Yeah.
But I had like 300 bullet points that they said, these are all the things you need to do to get going. So before I opened this clinic, I knew FDA's rules, DEA's, EPA, like states, federals. Like I had like 20 things, right? Because I was ready for the state to come in and say, what are you doing?
Yes.
And I think that's something now that I'm learning, because
that's powerful.
Well, right. But then you call the state, or you call the DEA, or you call somebody else, because you just want to ask them a question. You want to call OSHA and ask them a question. One, most of them don't know the answer, and they'll say, well, just go to DEA.gov. And I don't know if you've ever been there. It's like 8,000 pages. It's like an encyclopedia. They're like, it's on there. And you're like, I'm just asking one question. Can you answer the one question? Or the state will say, well, just do the best that you can do. So I'm like, you're telling people to like do these things. We're scared to death because you easily put medical providers in prison for things, but then we're coming out to try to help heal. And you want us to do the quote unquote, the best you can do, but you're not giving us any structure or guidance. Right. So when that happens,
that feels very loose.
It's very loose, but then they start to come down on you on things, and they'll say, well, you were expected to know this, so
it was in the guide.
It was
that you couldn't interpret with no boundaries.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
So now I'm more involved I'm involved local, state, and federal levels to a point, because what I'm seeing is,
and this is your advocacy work, right? So
I think that's my whole life.
Okay.
Is advocacy that I can tell with my brain. I just feel aligned with advocacy. Probably with you with businesses, right? With the women.
Yes.
I'm still in that traumatic phase of understanding the business portion, but the whole advocacy for mental health and medicine, I'm there. But it's compartmentalization from what I can tell, right? So it's like the hospital, that's their world. The FDA, that's their world. The DEA, that's their world. And we're all forgetting about the person and why we created all these systems and how we support the person. So I see the person, and then I want to advocate for the person through these different sectors, because they don't always understand the language, and I don't either, but I understand it better now than I did. But I do know that when I sit in a meeting with the health department, I understand a different language than they do, or I understand a different language than the physicians do, or than the nurses do. And if we can start to decrease these communication barriers, then I think we'll start saving more lives. And this is on a business perspective too, right? I mean, people, you and I could probably go all day long speaking about the business aspects. But again, I'm still very fresh in business, to where I'm just now coming around to this second time seeing something, or the third time seeing something, saying, okay, wait a minute. Something doesn't seem like it's aligning, or it does seem like this is aligning, like this is the way it's supposed to work.
Yes.
And
so let me ask you, let's double click a little bit, because I'm sure that some people are rocking right along with us, right? This vibration, and they're getting it because they are familiar with medicine. They're familiar with anesthesia, and they're familiar with some of the lanes that you're talking about. And somebody else is kind of saying, I'm not sure that I quite connect the dots, right? So at the simplest level, when you think about Revitalist, what is the mission? What is it? Is it advocacy, or is it actual treatment?
It's treatment.
Okay.
Yeah. So
it's treatment.
It's effective treatment.
So tell me more about that.
I
knew there was a layer.
Yes. So it's effective treatment. And so the youngest person we've treated was 12 years old. The oldest person we've treated is 92.
Wow.
And so, but it's 3 primary levels, right? So it's pain, mental health, and neurodegeneration. But really, under those 3 levels, the ultimate level is the brain. Yes. So what we're seeing now is there's actual interventions you can do to help people to go into remission of their symptoms.
Got it.
And that's what society doesn't even know can exist yet, right? So we can take away pain syndromes, we can take away mental health issues, and then the neurodegeneration, we can either stop those or reverse them, right? So like,
wow.
like
So is that like Alzheimer's and stuff like that?
Yeah.
And yeah,
Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's,
wow,
ALS, MS.
That's around my life.
Huge.
Sure.
Yeah. CTE, talking about sports, the chronic traumatic encephalopathy. They're using psychedelics and ketamine for this stuff too. But it's things that it's just like, it's amazing when you start seeing these things. Like,
how did you find this particular lane? So I know you mentioned you were in the hospital and you saw the end result when it wasn't even brought forward. But what calls to you as this is a solution for so much more and so many?
So I saw the data, right? And that's why I opened the clinic. But before I went back to anesthesia school, I was an IC nurse for about 10 years.
Oh.
So when I started sitting down and doing consults with people, they would come in and they would start telling me their story. And, you know, me being completely ignorant in the space, I thought psychiatrists spoke to therapists. I thought primary cares would speak to neurologists.
I think that.
None of them talk to each other. They're all siloed. So the only person who's advocating for themselves is the sick person in the middle.
Wow.
So what we did is I would sit there and I would hear their story and I would say, okay, there's something called a release of information that gives me the ability to speak to their providers. And I would say, write them all down because I've worked with all of them. If you have postpartum depression and you're seeing your obstetrician, like my language style will change speaking to an obstetrician versus if I'm speaking to a neurosurgeon.
That makes sense.
But I can speak their different languages and I know where they're coming from.
Corporate. I talk different to the sales leader than I do to the ops leader than I do to the ...
100%.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what I saw was what we do in the hospital when somebody comes in and we have all these specialists come in.
Yeah.
We're all advocating for that person. But then that doesn't exist in the outpatient world. The person's having to advocate for themselves. And what we do in medicine, we like to say when they bring in articles, like, I think this is it. I was Googling it. Oh, did you go to medical school? You know?
Yeah.
So we sit there.
I mean, we've all been there, right?
Yeah.
Or something happens and you're like Googling and then you're like, I don't even want to see what the Google says.
Right.
It always gets back to the same horrible thing.
But the only thing that you're doing is advocating for yourself. And we tell you, you're not smart enough to advocate for yourself. I'm not going to look at the articles, you know, like you can go to medical school just as easily as I went to medical school, you know, so
that's where the arrogance comes in that you talk about.
Yeah. So we belittle them, but we don't even understand that we're belittling them, right? So they don't even have those communication skill sets to see that. So I think, you know, what I did with the company, and my company is very well aware of this. I say when somebody comes in, you basically love them and accept them, and you help them to advocate for the best version of themselves. And that's it, right? Wow. So when somebody comes in,
what a powerful mission.
Yeah, right. So I'm not putting you in my bubble with my skill set. I'm seeing how can I best help you with my skill set. So it's flipping the narrative, right? And unfortunately, there's just so much, right? Like I said, it's still.
How does the person find you? How does someone find Revitalist? Who finds it? Does Revitalist find the person? Right. So I'm trying to understand.
So we have videos and things like that out that talk about the different ways of the brain. Because that's the other thing too, is like, I'm kind of in your baby footsteps. I've got a book that I wrote just recently about how the brain's changing, or the narrative may be changing with the brain.
What's the name of the book?
Theory.
Okay.
So I'm going to do the whole series. So the overall is called Inflamed. Wow. But then it'll be theory underneath. But my Inflamed is going to talk more so about like, yes, inflammation, but then also, about Western society hating Eastern society, about how, in the business world, like I'm seeing like there's all these amazing healers, but then there's also predators, right? And I'm just now starting to see those dynamics and how those really, go into play, because there have been a lot of amazing creators that are healers that have started this and they've tried to take it to the next level and they haven't made it. And what does that do? That decreases access to people. And
then there's so much out there, to your point, because the layperson like me, right, is who do you listen to? Who do you believe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And that's one of the beautiful things, because mental health doesn't exist in a medical provider's eyes. It doesn't.
Tell me more about that.
Right. So when they say, so we're not trained, right, in medical about mental health. We do psychiatry stuff to where we're like, oh yeah, that's the crazy drugs. Put them on, antipsychotics or whatever, right?
Yes.
Or restrain them. Like, so if somebody comes into the ER and they want to hurt themselves, well, we're going to help them not to hurt themselves. So we will
momentary thing. It's
100%. So we sedate you and restrain you, and if you're still really bad, we'll intubate you and put you on a breathing machine. So we just we do nothing for the person except we're going to save your life right now by not allowing yourself to hurt yourself. But then we get them, quote unquote, committed, right, to a hospital. And unfortunately, I was talking about this the other day. It's so unethical. So say if I go to the emergency room and I want to hurt myself, because that's what we tell people, right? Call 911, go to your closest ER. So if I get assessed and I am deemed that I want to hurt myself or others, that I'm at risk, then I get committed. Well, if I'm committed, I'm a property of the state then.
Wow.
So I'm committed. They go to the other hospitals around and they say, hey, Katie Walker needs to be committed to this hospital. Do you have anybody, or can you accept her? And they'll say, yep, we can accept her, but we've got 38 people on the waiting list in front of her. So what happens is, and this is every day in all your hospitals.
So then where's Katie right now while they're going to let you go?
You sit in the emergency room and you sit there. They will feed you 3 meals a day, but you are accepted by the other hospital. So therefore, this hospital is no longer treating you.
So you're just sitting there.
You don't get your medicines. You don't get your clothes. You sit there and you get fed until they pick you up and take you to the hospital, the other hospital. So you can see why people, right? Because I'll tell people when they come to the clinic, I'm like, I don't care if you want to kill yourself right now. I really don't. Tell me where you're at. Because a lot of people won't tell you they are thinking about hurting themselves because they've already been in that system of trauma. We traumatize them, and they will not tell you. They will only tell you. They will only be truthful to you when they start feeling better. Wow. And that's,
I was really feeling bad that day.
Oh yeah. Like I was afraid to tell you how I really felt because I didn't want to get committed.
Wow.
So it's just like,
So tell
it's all
the
broken.
Population that's affected by this stuff. I just have a hunch that it's probably underserved. It's probably...
it's all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, it's all of them. Unfortunately with ketamine and psychedelics, right, the beautiful thing is the data's there. So ketamine, nobody owns it. So this is the beautiful piece.
So what is ketamine?
So ketamine is...
so basic.
Yeah, it's okay. So ketamine, I'll take you way back. So way back in the 50s, we had anesthetic drugs that were either explosive, cause liver failure, or cause seizures. That's all we had.
Jeez.
But then we discovered...
a full set of options.
That's why you saw that leather belt people would buy. It's like, bite the belt.
Yeah.
But they saw that this drug called PCP, angel dust, actually had anesthetic-like qualities, but its side effects with hallucinogenics was like terrible. So they took it back to the lab and they made ketamine from PCP. So ketamine is like 1/50th the strength of PCP. And they started using ketamine in Vietnam. That was the first time it was ever used. So it was called a battlefield anesthetic. So in 1970, it got approved.
Okay.
So this drug is 54 years old. And people are like, what is that? Isn't it a horse tranquilizer? So it is. So ketamine, approved in 1970, used in veterinary medicine in the 1980s. And it's still used in veterinary medicine, but it maintains their cardiac status and their respiratory. So if you take a lot of opiates, it decreases your blood pressure, it decreases your respirations, and usually people will die from like respiratory arrest. Ketamine maintains that. So you can overdose a little rodent with ketamine, it's going to be fine. You give it too much to an elephant, they're going to be fine. So it's a safety. It's on the World Health Organization's list of essential medications. So every country in the world
has to have it,
has access to ketamine. Yeah. So it was in the late 1990s. Because ketamine, it started losing favor because if you have to give a lot of ketamine to put somebody to sleep, and you have to give a lot of these other drugs to kind of counteract the hallucinogenic effects. The late 1990s, Yale University was doing a study on rodents to try to find a treatment for schizophrenia. So they were giving these rodents lethal doses of ketamine to make them look schizophrenic. And they started noticing that the rodents were becoming less depressed.
Wow.
So it was a complete accidental finding. And because I don't know if you remember this or if it was just where I grew up, to where it was like your brain grows until you're 26. And then after that, if you drink too much, if you lose a brain cell, it won't come back.
That's right. Yes.
Well,
we're definitely taught that our brain cells were not regenerative, right?
Exactly.
So these notions of new things like meditation more regularly and rest and all of the things that we were told, you lose sleep, you lost it. You don't get
gone. Exactly. Yeah. So
there's those brain cells.
Yep. So ketamine, they're showing now. So like there's things called like neurotransmitters, and if you look at them, like these little guys are like a highway. And they help the communication go from strand to strand. Well, if you're looking at your little highway, they have exit ramps. And the exit ramps are called dendrites. And these little exit ramps help the multiple highways connect to the multiple highways.
Makes sense.
Well, under stressful...
Interchange.
They do, right. So under stress...
I'm ready for a degree.
You are, that's right. You got it. When you see the picture, you'll recognize it.
That's a voodoo medicine.
Yeah. We'll make you a shaman. But when those little guys are under stressful conditions, your exit ramps start becoming damaged. So the communication between the highways decreases. So people will have foggy thoughts, thought blocking. Their cells, like they'll have atrophy over time, like their brain gets smaller over time. But every 30 to 60 days, our cells regenerate.
Oh, wow.
And when those cells regenerate, if they're regenerating under stressful conditions, that are just, it's inflammation, right, is what they're seeing, then they're not regenerating to be healthy. So ketamine, even after one treatment, was showing that these highways that looked like they had potholes in them had no more potholes. Your exit ramps were actually starting to come back again after one, right? So they're seeing now, the brain can regenerate. And that's something that I kind of talk about in my book is the brain can regenerate. Ketamine can help it regenerate on a physiologic level, right? So the blood flow, I'll tell people it's like your pipes per se and the electrical aspects. Ketamine can help with that. But what the brain does from a psychological level is the brain duplicates what it knows. So it's just like muscle memory. Right. So
no stress, it's going to keep going there.
Exactly. It's all it knows. Right. So if we're able to kind of pull it back and put it in a neutral environment, when you talk about meditation's putting the brain in a neutral environment, which allows it to start auto-regulating itself. So ketamine and psychedelics will put it in a neutral environment. But what happens is with that muscle memory that you have, like from the physical aspects, the brain also has behavioral memory. So we all have either good habits or bad habits or whatever anything else, right? It's consistently consistent.
I need coffee.
Exactly, right. And it's all based on your history as to what you do in the present. So once your brain becomes neutral, what happens and what you want it to happen a lot of times is it will disconnect that emotion from the object. So instead of your subjectivity and your objectivity being enmeshed, you're able to see, like, when I drink coffee, oh, it actually makes me feel worse. Why am I doing that? Is it because it's just a habit that I've become accustomed to? But I tell people it gives you that split second to where you can see that emotion that's connected to the situation. And if you can do that with a negative behavior, then a lot of times you can stop the action before it occurs.
It's really just that split second pause.
100%.
To say, okay, why am I doing this? Why am I grabbing the third cup today? Right?
Yep.
There's something that correlates between me going to the next meeting and just holding the coffee.
Just warm. Like I noticed that when I was getting sick at the hospital work night shift, I drink so much coffee and I was like, I think it's just the warmth I need. So now I just like drink hot water. I still get the same effect.
Same thing.
Do you?
It's on that one. Yes. Hot water with, lemon or some herbs in there.
I will completely I'll cut up half a lime and stick it in there. And absolutely.
I do cinnamon at the moment. I'll just sprinkle
hot water
and cinnamon.
Yeah. It's just, it's a habit, right? You're able to see that. But that's what we're seeing. That's what I talk to people a lot about, like with like the suicidality piece, right? Because you got pain, mental health, and neurodegeneration stuff, but the suicidality aspect drives me crazy too. because me personally, I think suicide is because of a lack of coping mechanisms. And when we get stressed, we feel out of control, and our brain's wanting to balance that control aspects. So we just want to get out of the situation, right? Just like that. You just want to get out. So a lot of times, if you're
losing that pause, right?
Yeah.
Because you wanna believe that, so many that choose that as that option, you just feel so much compassion with, there was no pause between this situation and that outcome, right? Even that one split second pause to consider something different, there was no space for that.
No. Well, I mean, think about it, right? So the brain doesn't know right from wrong, good from bad. It's all in the way it's trained. And it's trained from the external factors, right? It's not like we choose the training. We're just having to deal with the training that it receives.
So much of it is in our paradigm.
100%. Yeah. So if you're sitting there thinking about that split second when people go kill themselves, it's like flip the narrative. What happens when entrepreneurs like me and you, when we get this idea in our head and we're like, this is going to work.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And we put our head down and we go.
Yes.
Suicidality is the exact same, but it's the exact opposite, And that's what people, and unfortunately right now, what do we say when somebody kills themselves? I didn't know they were depressed. Well, it's usually not depression, as to how. Now, most people do feel like they're living in hellacious conditions and they want to get out of it. But that's one thing that's the most beautiful thing about ketamine that I've seen is with PTSD and suicidality, it should be a first-line treatment because it gives them a breath.
So who is, so I want to talk about Revitalist because I think you're publicly traded now, right?
I am.
So how long have you been in existence? Since 2018?
I have.
And already a publicly traded company.
You act like that's an odd question, and it is.
Yeah. Yeah. What?
That's called, remember when I was talking about the healers and the predators?
Yeah.
That's called people really believing in what I could do. And they came in, I had BC guys come in 2020 because I didn't have any capital. Yeah. I just did this kind of.
I literally work for 100-plus-year-old company now that, has probably only been listed, a year.
Yeah. Yeah. So mine, well, this is interesting, especially with your business background. So I had venture capitals come in 2020, asked if I wanted to take my company public and on the CSE, so the Canadian Securities Exchange, which is a much smaller exchange.
Yes.
You basically just have to do a budget of $1 million.
Okay.
For the CSE or to show what your budget's going to be for the next 12 months.
Yep.
To get on. And when they told me that, and they really sold me on the idea because of I'm like, we've got to tell people about this, right? And from a public company standpoint, you get a bigger audience, right? So, and me personally, I was telling guys,
a strategy for awareness and reach.
100%, and that's right, and that's why I'm still here today, but I have learned a lot.
Yes.
Yeah. So she became public August 24th of 2021.
Would you have done that now, knowing what you know?
You know what? I have learned probably 60 years of stuff in the last 3.
That's how it comes.
So I've told people, would I mean, I lost my marriage over it. My mom died during that time. It was within, it was a lot at one time kind of stuff. And, but would I do it again? I probably would, expecting that it's the mission that I'm executing on to help people.
I see that.
But it was really, it was one of those strategies to where I had all the wrong people took me public, right? If you look at the psychedelic space, it imitated the cannabis space to where there was a lot of money up front. A lot of people lost their money. So it was, ill-intentioned strategies from people getting in that space. There's a lot of companies like mine that went bankrupt that raised 5 to 10 times more money than I ever did. So, I did have enough gall to push out a lot of those people.
Good.
So I've had 2 failed hostile takeovers with my company.
Wow.
And I mean, fortunately, I was a creator, right? I'm like, I know it from the toilets to where the business cards are made.
That's awesome.
So people don't really know how to push me out. Yeah.
That's keeping agency too, right? You want to talk about you're not a businesswoman? That's not true. first of all.
Right.
That's why I'm going to stop you there.
I had been in the fire
Because I'm going to tell
with
you,
gas on it.
A businesswoman, right? A businesswoman is any woman, any person, right? A business person is any person that knows their business, period. All of it, right? And, you know, there's no investor that can come in and take that part away from you, right? And so at the end of the day, I think some of it is kind of figuring out, wait a minute, this doesn't look like I expected it to. Where actually am I, right? And it's feeling those little creepy crawlies that I'm sure even from a mental health standpoint, you know, like that's the thing where you're in a room and you're like, I don't know what's going on, but something feels like it's going on. Probably something's going on, right? And your brain is getting the signals and you're just either going to accept it or not, right? And you choose how to be very strategic in your actions to get the outcome that you want, right?
Yeah, you're right.
Businesswoman.
Versatility. Versatility's huge. And then it's the ability to get up, you know, because when you get hit and you get kicked down and it's interesting because I've had a lot of great men in the space, right?
Yes.
And I've had a lot of men.
And I don't bash men, honestly. I mean, you know, I uplift women voices, but I'm going to be honest with you. I think so many women, self included, have been benefited by the men in their lives. My dad, Anchor. He was the first person to say, your voice is powerful.
No.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Mine, I just get told that I'm too loud sometimes.
and then he tells me, you know, you can hush.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, though, you know, from the business perspective, because a lot of the men that I've been around, you know, because from the public company standpoint, I mean, honestly, I've probably been around 2 women, you know, in the past 4 years. Yeah. And, you know, but it's interesting because the men aren't used to women either. And they really like...
And they're married to them.
Right.
A lot of them. Not all.
And they like it when I call them, what was it? They like to call me out on certain things. And this is a guy I used to work with. And I said, I always call people guys. And I've actually started, I've nominated some of the guys. I call them Marshmallow Boys. Because I don't know if you know the study that came out in the 70s.
Oh, yeah, when the marshmallows were in the bowl?
Yeah, where it's like, if you take a marshmallow, you get $1, and if you wait for 5 minutes, you get $5. They all took $1.
Yep.
So I'm like, I have dealt with so many Marshmallow Boys. They lose their man status.
I love that.
But I had one guy, and he was like, he said, why do you call everybody? I always say, hey, guys, what's up? And they're like, why do you always say guys? Because, Katie, you are a lady. And he was like, why would you not, you know, acknowledge that when you come into a room? And I was like, well, I mean, I feel like I would probably just offend all the men if I came in and said, hey, ladies, what's up?
That might not work out.
Yeah, he was like, okay, I can see that. I was like, that's why I call everybody guys. It's just a, you know, generic term.
Katie, at the end of the day, I think what I've learned, and probably you have too, is honestly, you just got to live in the space that you are in, right? Be who you are. It's that authenticity that frees you up, right?
And I think that's learning it, right? And it's probably from your level too, right? Is like when I tell you I'm still learning.
Yeah.
Like, because I have had so many people, a lot of people are like, yeah, you're brilliant. And I'm still learning that piece. But other people will say, we've got to box you. We've got to get you here, you know, and you got to be focused.
And that's never going to change, sister.
Right, yeah. And
but here's what I'm going to tell you, because this is a moment that I wouldn't even want to miss this. What I've learned is people will want to box you.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very important to know what your center core is, so that when you see that box coming, you can decide how to be in that box, but to be true to who you are. And so you don't get in the box and you're like, wait a minute, how did I get in the box? And secondly, who the hell am I, right?
Exactly.
No.
Right.
At least keep who you are.
Yep.
Because, you know, the systems and structures that we navigate and live within to push forth the mission that we're trying to accomplish, whatever that is, it could be your kids, it could be your mission and work, it could be whatever it is, right? They're going to be the boxes, but how do you stay true to who you are? And how do you recognize when you're being pushed out of that zone?
Right. And that's the piece of it.
That's been my lesson this last month. how do I recognize when someone has moved me to a new box of behavior?
Yep, 100%. And that's something that it's like, yeah, it's because when it doesn't, because you lose it, right? You lose yourself. And that's what you don't want to do, is to lose that.
And when you lose yourself, that's when you feel a little, wait a minute, what's going on?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, I had a guy, I don't know why, what something you said just made me think of this. But there's a guy, close friend, he's a male surgeon, but he operates on females. And he was telling me, we did a webinar or something one time a while back, and he was telling me how Western medicine is very boxed. And he said it's very compartmentalized. He said, he goes, you can tell Western medicine was created by a man, not created by a female. And he said, because when we go in, we look at the body like car parts. And we take this part out and we put this part back in, right, to replace it. And he said, but seeing how women's brains work, he said, females, everything's connected. He's like, your toe is going to go to your eye, it's going to go to your brain. And he said, but it's all connected.
Yes.
And he said, and that's why Western medicine doesn't work, because we've always looked at it as compartments and boxes, not as one system that operates and, it's integrated.
What do you think? So I've been on this journey where I really have been thinking about the value of Western and the value of Eastern coexisting. I really believe that there's some wonderful complementarities between the two, but it is a paradigm shift for most conversations to talk about that, right? Because whether it's, our religious practices, whether it's our upbringing in medicine, whether it's, you pick the lane, we do get very regimented around the way it should be, right? Instead of layering things in. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah. I think, like we look at acupuncture, right? So
that's one of my jams.
Yeah. So acupuncture, is like, we're like, oh, it's so old, and most people are like, oh, it's so old, whatever, it doesn't really make sense. Like, here's the newest technology, right? So it's almost like with the medical mindset, we look at like the newest Apple computer, being the next best thing.
Yes.
But we're doing the same thing. We're kind of putting that same thought process into medicine as well. But with acupuncture, it was interesting because I have a couple of acupuncturists that I work with, and amazing, right? I know nothing about acupuncture.
Yep.
Zero. One of them started telling me about it, and I said, you just described anesthesia to me. But the interesting thing is because anesthesia is like, oh yeah, they know what they're doing. Acupuncture doesn't know anything, right, in the traditional mindset of Western medicine. But when they go around a nerve root, right, acupuncturists will go around the nerve root and they stimulate the nerve root to actually increase blood flow, which decreases inflammation, which makes everything start working better together.
Yes.
In anesthesia, we go around the nerve root and we block it. So we completely isolate the nerve to prevent pain.
Yes.
Whereas they're actually working with the body that way. So, no, I think the more, and I think this will happen when I was telling you, that mental health is not real in the medical space. The reason it's not real is because they can't see it. And they have to be able to see it. So there's a group I'm working with that's working on biomarkers, where if we draw blood, if we can measure these inflammatory cytokines, so it's like in markers, right? Inflammatory markers, we can measure those, and then we can start treating those that may be causing our mental health to cycle or our pain to cycle.
Yes.
That's when mental health will become real, because that's what the Western medicine society knows.
Right.
Right. So Eastern medicine, it's like, vibrations, energy. Western medicine, they do not listen to the words vibration or energy.
No.
But the beautiful thing about it is like, because I'm like, when I first heard that, and I was like, there is data that shows people who have been in significant situations of trauma, when you have that fight, flight, freeze, and say you're sitting there and you freeze to a very significant event, it's not that the energy went away.
Yep.
You absorbed it.
Oh, God, yeah.
And then your body actually starts functioning on a higher level of energy, right? Which is vibrations. So I'll tell people when they're like, oh, energy, whatever. And I'm like, it's hyperexcitable cells. And they're like, oh, in medicine, hyper excitable cells, they accept that term all day long.
Yeah.
Energy, no. But I'm like, but energy's physics.
Yeah.
Like
I
energy is
love that.
physics.
I
you know?
love that, because honestly, what you're pointing out, that in your space, now taking it back to Revitalist as a business, right? In your space, what you're doing is bringing disparate viewpoints on the same thing together, right? To an outcome that benefits a human being.
Yep. It's communication breakdown.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And people,
That's so much of it.
that's all. You're right. Exactly.
Everything. If we women could only solve all the problems with just talk.
We're working on it. But I would have to sit there with therapists, right? Because we don't like therapists. And this is the other thing too. Therapists are not in the hospital. You know, the closest thing we have to a therapist in the hospital is a chaplain.
Wow.
So medical providers don't know how to.
This is a hot mess.
It is. It is. It's like, well, somebody threw off. Here's a therapist over here. Let's go find a physician over here. And they just don't understand each other, right? They're just so foreign to each other. So, you know, some of the therapists, I've probably worked with over 100 therapists now. But when I first, and I've gotten much better with hearing their language. But used to, I'd have to close my eyes and try to hear what they were trying to tell me, because their language is so different, right? So,
Get that.
and it's a training. So me personally, as a nurse or as a provider, in order for me to do a training to someone else or to produce research, I have to have like peer-reviewed journals. So I have to see a pattern, and then I have to have my peers look at it and say, okay, is this real? And then, you know, and then I have to get validation from them before it can be produced. In the therapy world, that's not the way it works. Because the way you feel is specific to the way you feel. So you write a research paper or a paper based on how it made you feel personally, and then that can be published. So we're not looking, even though they're all under the same umbrella, we're looking at like the elephant and the tiger completely the same. And they're
one is more holistic and one is very singular, very specific.
Yeah. So it's it will get there. I mean, like, you know, my ex-husband, who's the heart surgeon, and he an amazing heart surgeon. He has so many people that are intimidated of him. Like when he walks in, they all like straighten up, you know, kind of thing.
I love that.
And but I was telling him, I was like, you need to give him B12, like vitamin B12. And he's like, do you know how crazy everyone will think I am in the hospital if I give them B12? And it was for blood pressure. So like after you have open heart surgery, some people just have low blood pressure.
Yes.
And it's so hard to get up, and people can die from it. And it's a system that we just can't stimulate. And I saw, after I read something, it was like 1 dose of vitamin B12 IV actually auto-corrected their blood pressure. And it was a couple months later, he brought me a journal, and it's called like the Cardiothoracic Annals. And it's like a 1-inch thick, you know, magazine kind of thing that they published, and it had it in there, vitamin B12 for post-op hypotension. Yeah. Wow. You know, so if you can talk unfortunately I've talked in the heart surgeon, the neurosurgeon, the trauma surgeon, they all believe in ketamine and psychedelics now. If you can talk them into it, the world's going to listen.
So is that your single product?
Ketamine? So I have ketamine in the States. Yeah, so I have ketamine in the States. And then we just opened up a retreat. So we've been doing retreats for psilocybin, which is magic mushrooms. Okay. We've been doing that in Jamaica for like the last 2.5 years. We just shifted our operations over to the British Virgin Islands. So we'll be doing those open up.
Girl, you are pushing me all kind of boundaries in my comfort zone. What are you talking about?
You want to come?
There's not even enough time for this.
You want to come to the British Virgin Islands and do mushrooms?
Oh my God! I think the answer is I have no idea what that would be saying yes to. That's what it is, right?
You're right.
But how did you get into all of this stuff? Really?
I think the universe is shoved in here.
Like Louisiana. I got your vibe, and here you are in the British Islands with mushrooms. Being magic.
Right. You're right.
Okay, yeah.
I think it's you know what it is? It's always having the mindset to say, okay, whatever, like what's the next path? Okay, I was always jealous of the people who knew exactly what they wanted to do in life.
Yeah.
And I've always been the type of like, well, here's a door that's opening. Let's see where it goes.
Okay, so I have to go here because, you know, I wouldn't be a good Southern woman if I didn't, right? Because I have to. So when you start talking about these things that sort of push the boundaries of paradigms and norms of the most conservative minds, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you get past some of the stigma that we all have, we all grow up with, right? That says, oh, she's pushing a boundary. Oh, she's one of them. Oh. And now you're a CEO of a publicly listed company with an obligation and responsibility to your investors, right? Yep. Where's that magic, pun intended, line for you? Where is that? And how do you walk it? How do you stay fully integrated with what you believe for your mission, but also cognizant of this world around you, yep, where if you look at the numbers and you draw the concentric circle, they're going to be more on the bubble on the outside than on the inside, right? Because let's face it, even with, medical marijuana, right? It's been a journey to get to the place where it is now, and it's accepted even for medical purposes, right? Well, you just pushed it the whole next level with psychedelic, and all the things, right? I can't even say it, right? But
I think there's a magazine called that.
Is it really?
Just say?
If not, I will create it and invent it. But you know what I'm saying? So tell me a little bit about that.
So
I think it's important to bring integrity to the conversation.
100%.
People are listening like, okay, they lost me in British.
Right. Yeah. No, 100%. So, and that's something like I've never been able to cheat. Like, I don't know if you know, there's a game called Rook. But like my family used to always play that game growing up, and I never could cheat in this card game. So like I have this like there's right and there's wrong. So even though I do aggressively push everything, I don't push past the line, right, as to what I know. So and a lot of people do, right? So with ketamine specifically in the States, so we work with like University of Florida, we work with Johns Hopkins, I work with some guys from Yale University. And they've got all of our data and things like that. We have a contract with the VA. So we have a federal contract with the VA to where they reimburse us 100% for the veterans that they send to us. And that's all under our ketamine stuff. Psilocybin's completely illegal in the United States. It can be decriminalized, right? So decriminalization means I could grow my own, I could take my own, but I can't sell it and I can't get it prescribed, right? So it's still very limited. Now, in the British Virgin Islands, we're working with the government down there to where it's their Medicare kind of system, to where we're working with them. So it's completely legal what we're doing there.
Got it.
But what you have to be careful with.
That's important for everybody to know.
It is. But also the other piece, and this is from my advocacy thing too, right, is I don't care what people do. I really don't.
Yeah.
But I want to make sure they have the systems there that help to support them, right? So if people are, and this is what drives me crazy with the DEA, and I'll show up. So when people are like, she's doing what? Like, I've showed up to this, like when I find out about the meetings that they're having about me, I usually just show up and defend myself accordingly. But yeah, but with those pieces, like, so there is a lot of community ketamine. There's a lot of community psychedelics. And what scares me to death, and this is why I'm like, can we not just legalize it to some point to where we at least know it's clean as to what they're getting? Because what scares me is what happens when it's psychedelic and it's getting laced with fentanyl, because there is no regulation with that, right? So what we do too is...
scares me in general. I'll be honest.
It should.
As mom, it scares, right? Yep. Because we are fortunately in a position where we have strategies, we have story. Younger ones don't. And to your point, even in the system of the VC, right, they're actors that are good and bad. And I just applaud and appreciate how responsible you are with something that is so big, right? Because I would imagine your heart is to make sure that your message isn't misunderstood, and you're not positioning things that went from great for the person to horrible for the person, right? Depending on, story and
that's what you have to be careful about, right? Because we, like with the therapists, I have several full-time therapists with the company, and they all know, like, so my company supports, like, if somebody is doing any type of drugs in the external world, my therapists are trained to sit with them, right? Because I want to make sure that those people are supported. Because what happens is people, they're like, you'll have a friend who says, you've got to try this. It's great. And then you get them out there and they try it and they're completely traumatized. They have no idea what happened. They're complete, like they don't have the structure. So even from the illegal standings, if people are doing the drugs in an illegal capacity, we still want to train them enough to say, okay, in the event there's an emergency or what happened, how can we best help support you? Okay, next time, why don't we try it this way, like at one of the clinics, because you don't know what you're getting on the black market. You just don't.
That's what we're fighting, right? We're fighting good versus evil. So look, we could honestly talk forever.
I know.
Because you are a neurosurgeon, like-ish, and you're into all sorts of icks and acts and all kind of cool things. And I'm quite frankly just curious about people that experience trauma of their own, and they take that trauma and they turn it into purpose, and they make that purpose their mission. And honestly, from you sharing your story, your heartfelt story, it's what I hear, right? There was trauma there, and that became purpose, and that purpose is now your mission. And I believe you're going to do great things. I might not understand it all, at least today, but certainly I can appreciate, we all can. Mental illness is a real thing. It's affecting families. It's affecting individuals. It's affecting all of us in one way or another, if we're honest, right? I think it's understanding what's available, right? It's understanding what support exists. It's understanding how to advocate for yourself, how to advocate for others. Having family members that are going down certain paths right now, I can tell you it's the hardest thing to get a really complete answer around what are the right things to decide. And I think where I land is it's so individualistic that folks really can't tell you, because these human brains that we have, they are incredibly amazing, right? And just even figuring one piece of it out, right, is a lifetime. And you're on that journey, and I applaud you. And you're just a bad mom, right? And you're doing it all. So, and bold too. So thank you for allowing me to learn more. And I'd love to talk to you again.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Yeah, it's been a great conversation.
2 things that we should take away about Revitalist that helps you. What can we do?
Oh, I would say, with Revitalist is knowing that there's going to be a cool story to believe in, right? That gives you hope for the future. That'll be one. And then I think the second one is, I'll say hope again, right? Hope that there are good people out there that are advocating and fighting the good fight. So people don't know who to trust and things like that. There are people out there that are trying to lead that.
All right, girl. Go with courage.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.